Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Relating to DevSecOps, where we explore the development, security, and operational issues of today so that we can solve real world problems with people that face them. I'm your host, Ken Toller, and joined again by my co host, Mike McCabe. Mike, welcome back to another Daylight episode. How are you doing today?
Good, good. You make it sound like we're Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, daylight versus nighttime episodes, but
I
same
always got
people.
the purple lights and things. Now it's
Yeah,
like
that's true.
bright and everybody's energized. It's,
Yeah. A little less
um,
burnt out in the afternoon.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Cool. So we have an interesting episode, leadership conversation episode today. Stepping a little bit away from, I guess, the general testing, and Mike and I were talking about problems in the security industry, especially in this day and age where it seems like there's a lot of budget cuts, personnel changes, a lot of layoffs, a lot of AI scares, and new tools and um, new bells and whistles, and um, getting the sense that maybe some of the senior leadership, um, the higher ups, are focusing on the wrong security goals, or are they focusing on the wrong security goals? And so we thought it'd be interesting to talk about some experiences and, uh, you know, conversations we had at conferences and with friends and colleagues about where focuses have moved and in the security world, and where we think we're sitting with that, and I think we both have sort of come to the conclusion, or at least, or have a feeling that that we're sort of going in this direction of focusing on the wrong things. And Mike, you really brought this to the table. So you want to summarize sort of where your head's at here?
Yeah, sure. I think you could title this as what I would do as a CISO. Which might be a little provocative. And if there are any CISOs listening, don't send me or Ken nasty letters about this. But I think my feeling and my observation from working with companies, it's always been true, but even more true these days with budgets being cut and the same demands being expected of CISOs and security teams and engineering teams, but with less resources. The phrase "more with less" has never been said more than in the past 6 months, I think. Um, and I think my view on this is an empathetic one, but I think it's from working with security teams who get their directives from CISOs, is CISOs, their motivation, their focus, their strategy seems to be in two places: fighting fires and the flavor of the week. So meaning, what's the newest audit finding? What's the new pen test finding? Someone reported some issue in the bug bounty. Why did this happen? How did this happen? Let's make sure it never happens again. Then the other one is, I just saw a Gartner chart. How they broke those things up into squares is amazing. I love it. We need to do whatever's in the top right square. And so let's reprioritize the team. Let's buy a tool. Let's get it integrated. I want to see results. I want a dashboard. I want to be part of the dashboard of dashboards. Um, I feel like that's where a lot of security teams focus, is like fighting fires and then strategies that never pan out or tools that never pan out, based on the latest RSA release. And being a practitioner and working with a lot of teams and working with a lot of smart people, I feel like there's always this big disconnect between what CISOs focus their teams on and what actually moves the needle in security. And I think, and we've said this before in this podcast, good engineering is how you prevent security issues from happening. Like, at the end of the day, that's what it is, in my opinion. Security is a view of how you do things in a well-engineered way, but it is just an aspect of engineering. So when you're building something, most of our jobs are protecting something that's being built. If it's a network, if it's a building, if it's a cloud environment, if it's an application, we're tasked with securing whatever's being built. And CISOs and security teams have always come in to do I'm going to buy a tool, it's going to tell me everything that's wrong, and then I'm going to go fix those things. But often, almost never, are they focused on why are these things going wrong in the first place and how do I solve it at the root, versus always trying to find it and fix it afterwards. And it's just a never ending struggle. Especially in the cloud space that I do a lot of work in. you're never going to find you're not going to find many success stories of people buying a tool, finding all the issues, and then just driving those down to zero, unless they go to how did this happen? How do we prevent it um, going forward? So that is my very long summary for where my head is at on this topic.
Well, I mean, you brought up a couple interesting things there. Like, do you think that why is it that you think there isn't a focus the on the root cause, and that there is such a focus on the immediate resolution to findings or things that exist? Do you think that, like, and I guess just to follow up on that is like, is it an urgency question? Like folks feel like, well, these are in our environment now. And so we need to we need to put the Band-Aid on before we can solve the disease that is, it's like it's always symptomatic solves, and the fact that they can never get away from the symptoms. I think it's like I think about it as um, if I have 1,000 holes, you know, I can't really solve what's causing the holes until I've patched the holes, is kind of the mentality. So where is the breaking point of that? Or what do you think the driver is about never getting to the root cause? And should an organization be at a particular posture before they can start investigating the root cause?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. It's hard to say in a vacuum, like when they should be like, all right, we're done fixing. Let's just start working on preventing. For certain things, obviously, you have to keep fixing them, and you can't just like leave the critical SQL injection in your website while you try to figure out why it happened and prevent it in the future. Like you have to fix certain things, but I mean, I think security is just driven by the adrenaline of constantly having issues and battles to fight. Like that has been the position we've been in forever is we know there's issues, we find issues, we have to go fix them. And there's never, I mean, I know shift left has been beaten to death. Um, but I don't even think I still think that shift left misses the mark in the sense that shift left is like, all right, we used to release an app to production, run a scanner against it, and then go tell them to fix it. Instead, we're going to run the scanner halfway through development and then tell them to go fix stuff. But that's still not solving the issue of why those things are popping up in that scanner in the first place. And, if it's like app security, that could be education, that could be missing patterns, that could be, um, just you don't have the right education for your developers, you don't have the right architecture built out, all those kinds of things are why those types of, you know, application security issues happen. And I don't feel like despite all the focus on shift left, have really gone back to like first principles of why security issues happen. And it's obviously a very complex thing. It's not like it's a simple checkbox, but you know, how do we, I think I've said this before, but how do we shift from security exists outside of what engineers do day to day? If that's network engineers, if it's like corporate network, if it's cloud network, if it's application development, if it's SaaS, how do they operate from outside, being their own little unit, trying to influence what the techies of the company do, to being the techies that do that work, and to actually solve the issues and be involved in building the things out. I think that's the problem we just had not solved. And I think the philosophy is still find and fix as much as possible. And that's just, it's never going to work. It's never going to scale. And the problem now is that people have less people to scale with versus more. So, um, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you bring up, and um I've been watching a show. Like, have you watched The Pit at all? This
I haven't watched it. I've heard of it.
No. So it's kind of making me think about this because it's an emergency room show, and all that kind of thing. And it's kind of making me think about, like, maybe the reason that folks have trouble with this is that they always feel like they are patching wounds. Like it's like it's kind of like, battlefield medicine versus emergency room medicine versus preventative medicine. You know, and it's like, I think that there's this challenge where CISOs and security leaders never get to the point where they're thinking about preventative medicine. They're always operating in emergency medicine, or battlefield medicine, meaning that they
Mhm.
always have enough vulnerabilities that they feel like their hands are so full that like I'm not worried about my vaccine or I'm not worried about my prevention right now. Or maybe I'm still doing it, but it's like I have all this other stuff to deal with. And then to sort of um shift that view a little bit, it's like, yes, that's probably true, but is it really emergency room time medicine, or is it just you've been Googling your symptoms? Like where is the priority actually lie? Like, not everything that you're looking at is necessarily something you need to take care of right now. Like, is that a view that sort of makes sense in the world you're creating here of like how people are perceiving this, or am I off?
No, I agree. I mean, I think it's I think it's a little bit our media and our, even our conferences, and definitely, if your board hears about some new vulnerability, they can be like, hey, what do we do to prevent this vulnerability? Then the CISO creates this whole, this chain of, hey, how are we preventing this vulnerability to his or her direct reports? They're going down to their teams asking the actual people who are the SMEs and have their hands involved in things. And there's a lot of that kind of external influence on security teams that push them to focus on areas that are probably not long-term priorities, might not even be relevant at all, um, to the team. And so you reprioritize people often because of those kinds of issues. But I think I think the philosophy change that has to happen is like that's always going to be there. Like there's always going to be an audit finding. You're always going to have pen test findings. You're always going to have bug bounty stuff pop up. Like just accept the fact that your life is going to suck in that way, no matter what. Like that's the role of a CISO. That's the role of, security leadership. And you have to move past constantly fighting that fire, like build the system to fight that fire for you, and then move to focus on preventing those fires from popping up as much. Not that you're necessarily ever going to get to zero fires. That's not realistic in a complex, world and a complex technology, but I think you just have to kind of go with like this is going to happen no matter what. I can't keep my head here forever. How do I make that shift? And I think that's where people still aren't at. It's not. I'm not trying to be unempathetic to be like, oh, CISOs are lazy or like they're dumb for having their head in this space. I totally see why they're pulled in a million different directions and they don't get to set their own destiny often. But I think if you want to be successful, you have to make that shift at a certain point beyond just fighting fires.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't disagree. And I think that, to your point, and to maybe shift the conversation a little bit, is the way that a lot of folks are looking at making that shift is to try to find these silver bullet tools or methodologies that fix these issues and sort of sell the dream of like, you know, AI driven static analysis that validates the results and only gives you high quality issues that can, save your team, your security and engineering team's time, but maybe hallucinates once in a while. Or, I think the other big buzzwords that I'm seeing right now are like runtime security or product security and sort of redefining the new shift left, the new DevSecOps. Um, so in that sort of Times Square world of all of these security vendors selling the new big thing, what does a CISO have to keep in mind when looking at these tools? And are there any that you see out there that are maybe uh, thinking about it the right way or doing what they say on the tin?
Huh. I mean, I think when it comes to prevention, I'm not sure. I think there's some really interesting tools out there that are good. I think of tools as like a point solution to solve a certain problem. I don't think there's a silver bullet that's like, we just bought this one tool, it solved all of our issues. I think they're really good point solutions for certain issues, like if it's static analysis or AppSec or cloud security, like there's really good solutions for different issues. But I think, and this is, I think, another problem that we're having when it comes to like budgets and consolidation of tools as people are buying the platforms. They're getting rid of tools, they're getting rid of point solutions and just moving to like a platform because they want to have one pane of glass. They want to have one subscription. They want to squeeze that one vendor and say, hey, we're going to spend more with you, but we want the best deal we can get because we're cutting these other solutions. We want freebies, all that kind of stuff. And that's understandable. But then again, you're getting back to you're buying a gigantic heavyweight tool that's not solving the actual core problem. So I think the question is, do you have a tool that is preventing, not a tool that is detecting? And your point about runtime, like I've worked with a client that has exactly gone down that route. Uh, Docker container runtime security. All right, let's buy a product. Let's get it integrated. Let's get these collectors put everywhere. We got to make network changes to get it all sent back to the mothership, into the dashboard. 6-month process, rewrite patterns, rewrite network rules. All right, it's operational. Who's paying attention to this? No one. Is there a standard to use these findings in any output? No. Is this even tied to the SOC so that they know what to do when this happens? No. Is there any context to these findings when they do pop up? No. So it's like you just integrated something to give more insight, but strategically it solved zero problems. And you just spent a huge amount of time engineering the solution to integrate that. So yeah, that's a perfect example of where I don't feel like it makes a lot of sense. Like, are we to the point where we're so good at preventing that we know everything that's out there is good, so that we need runtime security to tell us when something, uh, you know, is outside of what is a known good? I don't think so. I don't. I don't think people are in that good a spot. So
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think? Like, have you seen a use case for runtime where like, yeah, this definitely solved the problem or even helped with prevention?
Um, I think that it only, I think that they are the newest tooling is most effective if you've already got a good handle on the fundamental problems, like to your point, the root cause. So I don't think that you can move on to some of the like this is why I struggle a little bit with like the preventative tooling, because I think we should have it in place, you know. Um, but you need to, no tool is going to come out of the box pre-configured for your environment to prevent the things that are problems in your environment. And I think that that is kind of what people are looking for, and they underestimate the work it takes to get the prevention tool to that level. And the easy part of a um, like a scanning tool or detective tool is that it'll find stuff. And so it will, quote, work out of the box, even if it's not the most comprehensive or it's maybe not um, the most accurate. So it's like, well, we have stuff to do with stuff now, right? Like we have work to do with things that are being created, as opposed to we have work, we have work, but we don't know what the work is yet. Like we don't, my closest feeling to this is like, um, I've recently tried to start setting up a, um, like an incident response mechanism on in like the Web3 ecosystem. And one of the difficult parts is to figure out, well, what are the attacks or the indicators of attack that matter to a specific ecosystem beyond what's general, you know, like a large transaction happens, or somebody's trying to steal funds, very obvious things. But what about the things that are more specific to, how an ecosystem is being managed, or how do you correlate events between like social chatter and what's happening on a blockchain? That's an interesting question, but there's a lot of work that goes into like figuring out what are those indicators. Um, and I think another example is like when you turn on a new SaaS tool, it's like you turn on SemGrep, right? And it gives you a bunch of results. But you might want to start looking for, it's like when we start to create our custom rules, like how many people do you know that get stuck in the SaaS when it's like, okay, now we need to start writing custom rules? I mean, every single security program I've ever been in gets stuck at custom rules. they don't know what to do next. It's like they'll ask the vendor to write the rules, or they, so it's like there's always a point where it's like you have to get beyond the tool or beyond the process that becomes more difficult. And I think that until you've mastered that muscle of like getting your fundamentals down, taking the next step isn't appropriate. It's like you can't just keep putting band-aids on everything or shoveling things over the fence and not improving what you're talking about, the root cause. And I think that we're all moving so fast that maybe CISOs or leaders don't incentivize that root cause analysis behavior or know how to measure it. And exposing how to measure those things and how to incentivize those things out of a security team might be helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And to your first point, I think it's well said because a CISO is going to see a problem, they're going to buy the solution, but the solution is a general solution for everyone, not a solution for you in particular. So you quickly hit the limit of that general solution, and it might solve 10% of your problems, but then 90% of what it gives you is not contextual to your environment. Then you're just fighting findings and justifying why they're not real. And that's like just the story that's been told forever with security tooling. Yeah, I mean, I think to your point, like teams aren't focusing there, they're not empowered there. And I really think I think there's such a disconnect. And I think the solution really is like for CISOs to get in the weeds with their teams. Like I think traditionally it's been a more executive role where you're managing the board, you're managing managers, but like really good CISOs, I think are technical and understand what these issues look like. And I think they need to get into the weeds with their teams. And I mean, like in the weeds, like sit there with your cloud team and figure out how things get to the cloud and why it's misconfigured and what that pinch point is for how it goes out the door and why you can't implement security controls there to prevent things. Talk to your AppSec teams, talk to your engineering teams, like get in the weeds. Like, yeah, you're skipping over probably like one or two lines of managers, but there's such a disconnect between the practitioners who are just like screaming into the void every single day. We need to solve this problem. Here's the problem. Here's how we can solve it. The managers who they work for, who then distill that message as it goes up and up, and it just gets lost in the noise. If you're battling 10 findings from external audit that your board needs a response to tomorrow, versus like the security engineer, it's like, hey, we have this big issue that's coming through two managers who are going to distill it down to not worry their CISO and not make more work for them. Like, who are they going to hear? They're never going to hear the reality of what their environment looks like until they get hacked. And then an IR firm comes in and is like, hey, you had all of these things misconfigured. Like, this is why this happened. And the CISO is like, how did this possibly happen? I never heard anything about this. How could this possibly be true? And there's just this huge disconnect between leadership who sets the priority and the people, even, very smart, motivated, hardworking people doing the work. Uh, their voices never get heard as to why these issues happen. Um, and I just think like you need technical CISOs, technical leadership who can get into the weeds. I'm not saying they got to go solve SQL injections and parameterize queries, but at least understand at the root level what their environment looks like and how to solve those issues, how to empower their teams to solve those issues. That is
Yeah,
my solution to the issue.
I agree in the sense of like how I look at what a CISO's responsibility should be. I agree with you. I think that the majority of CISOs are not hired to do that. And I think that that's why the tenure of most CISOs is 2 years, because usually a business has a security requirement that causes them to hire a CISO. Most of the time, that is compliance driven or externally driven, either a board or a portfolio company, or they are going through an audit or they require a security leader. And then that CISO has a goal of getting them from point A to point B in as quick of a time as possible. They're not actually concerned about the best security program. they're concerned with moving them from point A to point B. And so all this stuff you're talking about getting into the weeds and having the technical expertise doing all that is not really in their remit, which is unfortunate, but I think that that is the reality. So I think the question is, how do we how do we get security leaders into the right mindset, or maybe return them to what got them into security in the first place, which is like providing this benefit to a company of making it more secure. I think that security leaders get so jaded by the business ask that they move more to the business side and start to lose their passion for the security side. And it's really difficult to maintain those two avenues because you're constantly battling things like you're talking about, which is the business wants this out of me, and the security piece of me and my practitioners want this out of me. And I need to walk that line of business and security, which makes an attractive CISO to a business. So, is there a world where those two can coexist?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point, and I think it's true. Like, if you're pulled around and you're not choosing your own destiny, which is what happens with a lot of CISOs, like, yeah, you're always answering the question, what are we doing about this? Or how are we responding to this? And then so you're not able to be more strategic. I definitely think that is true. And I do think that CISOs and leadership gets jaded and they get disconnected from the reality of the day to day. And I think that's the I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying like, hey, just flip a switch. None of this is easy. But I think that's what has to change is like, yes, you're always going to have those external asks that drive so much for your day to day. We need to be SOC 2 compliant. We need to be PCI compliant, whatever it might be. I just think all those things are achievable and you can actually make your day to day easier by fixing things at the root cause if you put more focus there. I mean, like every leader, no matter what it is, like whatever role it is, if it's engineering or security, if it's the president, everyone has their pet projects. They're like, I want to see this happen. I have a dream of making this happen. Since I was a 5-year-old, I wanted to see runtime security in my container images,
Oh my God.
like whatever it might be.
The only dream there is.
Yeah, the only dream there is. And those are the things that often I feel like those pet projects are the, you're talking about like the 10-20% of free time a security team might have that's not focused on those board level issues or pen test findings or whatever, compliance things. That gets wasted on, whatever it might be, the hot topic of the week. And that's the time that needs to be given back to the practitioners to say, how are we going to solve these issues? What do you need from me? How do you get empowered to solve these issues? Do you need to be an engineer and actually hands-on fixing things? So rarely is the answer, we need another tool. But that is the answer that so many security leaders are giving is like, we'll buy a solution for this. Perfect. We'll hire a consultant for this. Perfect. But it's like if you've done a good job hiring people, you have good quality, educated, knowledgeable people who want to solve the issue in-house who will do those things. But you're saying like, runtime security, got to know what's happening in those Docker containers.
Yeah.
And they're like, all right, great. So that thing that's going to get us hacked in 6-12 months is still hanging out there, but it's not a priority.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it sort of like, if you want to be like, give me the 5-year CISO, not the 2-year CISO. You know, I
Yeah.
think, and if you want to move to, if you are a security leader and you want to move and you want to be that person that transforms a security program, what can we do to solve the immediate needs? The reason that CISO is hired, and also lay the groundwork, the strong foundation for a security program that isn't always fighting fires, that is evolving over time. Like, what are the if I'm a CISO listening to this today, what is your opinion on something that I could do tomorrow that could maybe shift my mindset for my team, or make me look at things through your lens to get to these root causes, knowing what those goals are for those CISOs, which is I need to show results tomorrow, right, to the board or to the business.
Yeah, I mean, I think my take would be get out of your bubble. I think that's the big thing is, once you've been in the game long enough, once you're high enough in an organization, you're going to be in your own bubble of like you have yes men, yes people below you telling you everything is green, and you have other CISOs talking about other things that they think are a priority around you. You got to get out of that bubble. There are some very cynical, uh, semi burnt out, hardworking people at the lowest level of your security team that know what the issues are. Like it's funny because like the Phoenix Project covers this completely for the technology side. Like the whole story is about, all right, we can't ship fast enough. We have so many issues, so many delays happen all the time. Why does it happen? You don't say, all right, let's buy a tool. Let's buy Jira. Now we're shipping faster. No, you go to the root cause of why these things happen. You build the quote unquote factory for how things get out the door. And security is the same way. We're just like the people who are making sure the bolts are tight. We're putting the control in place to make sure the bolt is tight. So it's not that it can't be done. It's just that, like you said, there's certain motivations that come from higher up. There's certain people who just have a dream of implementing runtime security. I'm being sarcastic if anyone doesn't know me. And there's not enough time spent on reimagining what security means in that organization. That's my takeaway. You can send all your Instagrams to ken at
Yeah.
r2dso.com.
Yeah.
That's my takeaway for today.
Yeah. I mean, I do agree with you. I think, I know we're running on time, but I feel like we could talk about this for another half an hour. And it's like pick the simplest project and make that work. Like make your success. I think what I'm taking away from this is like set yourself up for success and make your projects and your successes smaller and more achievable. So if you're looking at like a new tool, or go to your existing tools first and figure out like why aren't these working today before you go and try to find the latest shiniest thing. you know I think there was a post on LinkedIn recently that I commented on. I won't call it out, but um it's it's kind of like, hey, like what is product security or what is runtime security? And I'm like, who cares right now? Like, focus on something smaller. Get get I think there's so much focus on like the platform. I think that was the other thing that you wanted to talk about, is like the big single pane of glass that nobody knows which piece of the pane of glass to focus on. And so sometimes it's valuable to just like tune your SAST. And it's like, if you can say, I'm happy with my SAST program, then go and find a new tool or a new approach. But how many people do you know that like have this janky SAST program and they're buying like, I don't know, whatever the latest CNAP is? Or it's just like there's just so much cruft in the industry right now of sort of half managed, um, poorly implemented tools. It's like, just stop buying it and go and focus on the ones that you have today and make that your focus and show the metrics, like show the progress of those. And I think that the biggest distraction that CISOs have is that the new tool gives new results, which are new metrics that they can show progress on, because it's like the first 10% is always the easiest, right? Like I can always take out the low-hanging fruit and be like, yeah, we closed, 10,000 vulnerabilities yesterday by updating jQuery.
Yeah.
And then it's like, then it gets hard. And so when it gets hard, you're like, well, how do I show progress? Then you buy the new tool and then you have a new set of low-hanging fruit. And I think that's where we're at. We're just like we're like the serial hobbyist of like security these days, and we don't focus enough on like the depth and like doing the
Yeah.
right things, um because uh that's harder to show progress in. And I think that's where we're at. So like my advice is like, just knuckle up and get those things done, because while that stuff is going to take longer, um, your metrics overall will be better, and then the new tools that you do buy are going to be even more effective. You're going to be that highlight customer.
Yeah, agreed.
I feel like we have more to talk about there, but we are at our 30 minutes. If you had to leave anyone listening to this podcast with something to walk away with, what would it be?
My advice for anyone, CISO or otherwise in leadership, I would say spend every day learning something new about your organization that you didn't know, that your leadership below you isn't going to tell you. So dig into the weeds every single day about something new. And that I think will be very informative about why things are the way they are for you.
And I think I said my piece just now. So, so
Just rewind.
yeah, you can just just like hit the back 30 seconds and or probably 5 minutes, and we'll go from there. Well, look, thanks, Mike, for bringing the topic to the forefront. I think we have more to talk about runtime security. It seems to be the next biggest buzzword. Maybe we can have a relating to runtime security podcast, spin-off of relating to DevSecOps. Now that we have a new shiny thing to talk about. On that note, thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.